or whatever it is, wherever you are. So let's say you had an error right off the bat. I might have had things in a little bit of a temporary state as we're trying out different stuff here. $15.50. Oh, that was from the settings. Oh, maybe I'm trying to update things as if it's the main screen, but I was actually doing that in the alternate screen. Yes, that's the song list, which we had not yet loaded. Oh, what the heck was selections? Okay, that's our... Oh, we have not yet performed selection. Because that's our warm-up period. But that's saying if current controls equals. Right, we went through there. Items, selections. Oh, does this mean that there is no items yet? Okay, so that's checking for items and items I. Attempt to index field a nil value. Right, Lua arrays are base 1, aren't they? So, that would be the actual indexing operation. So checking for the existence of that, well, might be okay. However, we're going to have to do a full wrap on that. Try and trigger it again. Okay, that's selection. All right, I think... Yeah, nothing there. So that was actually a small fix. Hmm. Okay. So I've got I was playing around with this sort of envelope thing, which has no visualization right now, where we bound it by score on the top and speed on the bottom, but just letting it pick randomly within there doesn't seem very satisfying. So I'm wondering if maybe I do the sine wave within that envelope. That's going to require thinking about things a little. Well, the problem is not a singular value. So what's your selection criteria? We look for songs that always have their notes per second that match up with their scores. You might want to. One of the points of this was to leave some. Well, let's only floor of score. What would a selection curve within that bound even look like? Maybe we continue. Have that as a strict boundary by score? But do selection based on notes per second with a variable bottom boundary and a roughly equivalent top boundary to that. And then we vary the intensity? So previously, I had been able to make it work on a singular curve that was doing score ranges. Well, I could probably make that somehow a generic curve that gets transformed in different ways for different purposes. But it's still going to be a boundary curve. So we'd have that, we'd have the wiggle for selection. Is it pick by? Pick by meter, which we haven't used in a long time. Pick by rate was straight up notes per second. Pick by range. Pick by score was our original main line. Pick by range does the upper bound and the lower bound, which was the NPS bound. So we need to improve all of that stuff. We've got current flow, and we have to figure out how we visualize that as well. Or maybe you just have the curve itself, and then there's sort of those implicit boundaries. Which go into the creation of the curve. For which I'm going to have to do some thinking about math. To get a sine wave that goes between a range of points. With variable amplitude. Well, as long as the shape of the curve is the same, that's basically an add, I think. And then that would be a... I wonder if there's a way to describe a curve that is like the center point between two other curves. Is the center point right? Well, I also need the center point and the range. I guess that could just be two curves, one that's a baseline and one you add to that. And then the one you add is the scaling factor for the sine wave. Well, because the more intuitive thing when I get to making settings that make sense for this is going to be set your high limit, set your low limit. So this is some fudged up math. So this is sort of adapted from the other system. Where we had your start difficulty and your middle difficulty. And then we just do a curve over that we've fudged up a bit to make it hit 1.0. And to make it approximately 0 to 1. Even though it was actually a probability distribution curve that was something slightly different. So if that's a 0, 1, we could set a range factor that would be a straight up multiplier on that. We could set... well... I guess that would just be two different multipliers. But those are actually... well, yeah, we're back to the same. We're setting two different things, so you need the equivalence ratio. So I might have to get into doing a separate model. It's just a notes per second model. So I've got NPS bound, which is an arbitrary little working curve that we eventually want to make big parameters for. On top of that, we want a upper bound on difficult, or on, well, lower bound on score. Which is what that's currently doing. And we need a range on... So I'm setting this up to go from... Yeah, so this is just a curve that has a weight. So for a given stage and a given constant, that's always the same. Man, and I'm just like a little bit congested isn't quite the right word. But I need to refresh my water, and I think maybe get a drop too. I'll be back in a minute or two. Oh, hi. Was he fighting a warper? Alright, home again, home again, home again.
Welcome back, everybody. I gotta remember to unmute myself. Yep, but I'm the kind of person who likes to max out stats. Okay, so I must not assigned that one before, and this I messed up on. Okay, oh, we're not at full speed. There we go.
We get some.
Alright. Welcome back. Alright, so we've got an overall curve, we've got a bottom curve. Well, I can try to get a basic implementation with just straight up math. So NPS bound is our lower entry. So we eventually want to be able to describe that as the lower bound. So that's the lower bound. So the curve from about 1 to 2 notes per second. We have an upper bound so we've got wiggle per item scale. So this is effectively going to turn into, well, it's going to turn into pick by rate with an additional bound on score at some point. So this was that original draft selection method. And this was leaving room for the wiggle. Now, arc flow. Man, no, it's still score. And similarly, the wiggle. So the way this works is actually, this is our, the way this works currently is this is our center line. We have that plus the selection range. So I was originally doing 1 to 2 as a bottom. And I might need to change selection to actually use the limits of that. And 4 is a top, we also have selection range. So if our basic sine wave goes from, sure, 1.5 to like 2 or 3, so that might be okay. In a selection range, so that was already 0.8, or a wiggle range. So that would get you up to 4 plus the selection range. It is sort of a bounded wiggle. I would need to go flip some art to see the selection range is on that. Also, I want to turn off my training. My required training. Mm-hmm. Warm and cool down might be a little bit over constrained. 1.5, 1.5. 1.5, 2.1. So we got a score of 62 to 3.5. .5. Well, there's a 4.1. So it can peak up there. It's not very much. I might need to describe my curve in some abstract term and then worry about converting it to whatever it needs to be later. And I might need to find a different curve that spins up a little bit faster too. Hmm. In order to use a single curve for both score and notes per second, we have to have the equivalence rate between them, which is just kind of an arbitrary constant. It made it look good for me. Doesn't mean it'll look good for everybody. Having some way to switch the rendering would be nice too. Because this stuff flips around every time we change modes. So that's kind of notes per second selection with a different, with an envelope wrapped around it. Hmm. And I'm wondering if I can mix the notes per second and score value a little bit. But they're already related. So that gets a little bit tricky. So how do we define a UI for this? Well, right now it's we have several constants going into notes per second curve. We're not actually performing any difficulty bounding. And whereas before, we tended to get lots and lots of hard ones, this seems to very rarely select those. So we might actually want to go up a little bit. .2 is starting to get hard, but these are just arbitrary constants again. Down to 2.5, yeah. A 1.8, pretty close to the peak. When we did pick by range, it was picking a bound and a bound, so we didn't have to have any sort of relationship between them. To have this work off of a single, we'd have to have that sort of constant relationship, which could vary. Yeah, scores potentially worked for any player skill. Notes per second is going to be a very manual, tweaky thing. could we have a difficulty cutoff for each round? And then do a notes per second selection. For that, I would have to do some math on the song population at that point. Or the song population overall, to be able to pick something at the appropriate position. So that's bound. We'd still have to have a separate setting for your low point. So if we establish an upper bound based on score, and then within the population of things that fit that, try to find a notes per second that is in some relative position rather than some absolute position. Which requires knowing the population there, or developing a separate linear model that can say, well, what is the appropriate range for this equivalent difficulty? So this becomes a much more complicated problem. Right now, we go through all possible steps and take the first one that matches some range. But this is actually based on our curve, based on our current position, there is some subset of steps that qualify for consideration. Of the ones that qualify, there is a range of notes per second. And we want to be picking within that population by some sort of interesting pattern. Possible steps, so that just enumerates them. This adds factors. Min BPM, max BPM. Actually, No, we go to view model. Yeah, min BPM has proven to be pretty much irrelevant. Our current model is actually using max BPM a bit. Also, significant timing changes has been a... I took notes per second out. Given the relationship, I'd be kind of curious, because we have several other things that are essentially sum up to notes per second. Oh, and significant timing changes. It shows up in a few places. So I'll probably have to reset, because I do appear to have some conservation of model on screen reload. Error has actually proven to be a pretty... Actually, what's the difference between error and jumps? Oh, okay. We messed something up there. 579. We are still in a position where we can just undo everything. Take those changes one at a time. Oh, that's right, I turned off my min training. Oh, that didn't reset the model. Okay. Well, I can probably arrange that. Initial theta, where... Yeah, just reset that every time for now. Then let's try just doing one at a time. Okay, significant timing changes. Did not prove to be a useful one. And we were thinking about trying notes per second. Is that all we needed? Since that seems to have a pretty strong relationship. No, there's some more stuff I want to do with the model, but I guess I was feeling kind of stuck on the other problems there. Because, I mean, in theory, NPS is just the sum of all these other kinds of notes. But that number actually seemed to be pretty closely related to the range there. That would give us a factor, but since it's that plus other stuff, it's not necessarily... You need a separate model that was just the notes per second. That's tightened it up for some of the small ones, not for all of them. Or for some of these 2.0s. Anyway, it seems to be pretty tight. That still doesn't help me with my actual selection algorithm. I guess I was just noticing that stuff. Okay. And I've done other... Yeah, because we're also changing the flow. What were you? Cross product? Keys. Is it still called anywhere? Factors key A to key B equals factors key A times factors key B. Oh, that's an option to add cross products of all variables, which is a thing that those kept in the linear model stuff. But it made for a really large model. Okay, we've reached the maximum amount of training we're going to do at once. We want to do... Well, the pick algorithm becomes a significantly more complicated beast. We have to limit by score, and then pick with... Oh, so what I was thinking about is... Do we ever sort possible steps? Because if we sorted by notes per second, it might be easier might be easier to pick within a range. You could find the first possible one that met the condition and the last possible one that met the condition, and then just pick something in between. Pairs of possible steps, possible steps, possible steps. And there was a scored steps. Incremental update. But I'm still using possible steps in places. So are these actually different, or... Table.insert, so it is a separate table. But we are looking at possible steps. Why did I do that? So that does the incremental update. Cell.score not equal to 0. Oh. Because we only want to run the algorithm on things that have scores that we can use to predict. So that's just a subset that have scores. In these algorithms, we are just stats recent pick by. So if we took this and did a sort on it, that might make it a bit more reasonable to pick within. Alright, I need to take a short break. I'll be back in a minute or two to see if a sort will make this a tractable problem here.
It's back.
No, wrong one. Oop, oh, cleared the cave. Woo! Got a little bit of air there.
Wait, you want to?
Then that should just be consistent. Oh shit, I'm wasting her food. Whoops. See, that's the thing. Because I went by.
I'm destroying this chest because I have the ring. It heals me when I destroy the chests, and let us continue. That's a boss room. Okay. have capes.
Nice comfy seats.
Mara, Debella, Kinnereth, Akatosh, Divines, please help me.
They're not gonna help you, bro. Sorry. It's not gonna happen.
Look at him.
You really don't
General
say much,
Tully
do
is
you?
the military governor. And it looks like the Thalmor are with him.
Hey!
Damn elves. I bet they had something to do with this.
I bet they did too. Whoa. I'm out of play area. I don't know where the hell I am in my house. I don't know where I'm at.
This
Ow!
Helgen. I used to...
Welcome back. So this is where I have to refresh myself on some Lewis stuff. Oh man, I had that. I had all these references figured out when I was working this before. I think it's 5.1. Do we have... This is more of a library. Table manipulation. Concat insert max. Numerical index. Sort. We probably actually do this in places. Sort names, sort names. Okay. Table.sort. Oh, so this is graph dimension of selection. Do I need to copy possible steps? I think I just sort possible steps. So that's this graph, which is sorted by score. Possible steps. So we take that. Sort it by. Are these just strings? Does that execute correctly? There don't seem to be any errors. So now we've got pick by. So I had a pick by range that was something different. What is this? This is a NPS wiggle less than score. Bounded score? And I don't have a good equivalence rule for that. All right, because we want to... Well, I still need to have additional settings for units per second floor. Maybe it's to replace range. This has a lower bound and an upper bound. It will kind of have a lower bound. But we'll end up O. Our flow will actually be defined by the bound. Well, no. Kinda yes. So a flow will be a proportional wiggle. So pick by range will kind of have the same lower and upper bound. So build flow is going to be a notes per second wiggle that's just proportional within whatever range it is. See, which 0 to 1. Well, no, not well. We can start with whatever range is and put a lower bound on it. Or maybe fudge something with these numbers to put a kind of bound on it. And then the wiggle range. Is that a reasonable way to do it? Because we're wiggling it. It's going to be kind of a 0, 1, but we want to be within that. So if it's 0, 1. Hey, Ooey boy. Oh, and hello. Maybe it's oh boy. I'm always terrible at pronouncing things. Welcome. I'm struggling with sort of intermediate forms as I explore some curves here. So I'm trying to get something I can sort of look at with my existing code, and then maybe we'll straighten it out later. And what I'm doing is kind of sufficiently different from what I've done that it's a little awkward. So I'm trying to make this song picker First Step Mania, and it's a little bit messed up now because, like I said, it's kind of intermediate state. I guess I could try putting it back to standard. So what I've been doing for a long time, I think, is that one. And then pick by score. See if that doesn't break anything. Okay, my settings are messed up because I had to adjust them for the other algorithm I was doing. But the basic idea is that I'm picking a range. This is picking ones that are way too hard because of the settings I mentioned earlier. And I'm trying to kind of pick this sort of like increasing and decreasing, sort of warm, cool down. Give me some variation, and then it's trying to pick scores based on top score, or if that's not available. And actually, there's a lot of only actual scores here. Or if that's not available, estimated score based on a linear model. But I haven't been super satisfied with that. You tend to get lots of patterns that are kind of like bouncing between two extremes, or 2 or 3 values. So you're always getting these same 3 level of songs or level of steps. 2 or 3. Sometimes we get things that are too slow, so like 0.5 is a really, really slow song. They're interesting to do every once in a while, but... Oh, well, there's an interesting one. 0 notes per second. I might just have to find and eliminate those. Somehow we have stats for a score, though. But so I'm trying to... So I've got that. You get like these high-low whiplash patterns that are always just the same 2 levels back and forth. You get these super easy songs. Estimates are kind of bad at high end, so I'm also going to do some model work later. So I'm playing around with bounding it by a score. So I don't do things that, like, estimated score is 46. Actual score is 43. I might not have a good time playing this. Low 60s is very often very difficult for me as far as those scores. So this is just misapplied settings, but I do kind of want to control for that a little bit. So I want to kind of have a boundary, a bounding envelope for worst score. And then because the other problem is that then I end up... Like, I don't want to do these super easy songs. When I was picking just by high score, that could cut out a faster song that I did very well at, just because it was probably something that was fun and easy for me to play. So I don't want to cut that out, but I also don't want to do these easy ones. So I'm trying to like have a upper bound by or lower bound, I guess, by difficulty you think of as high, score is low, so the terminology gets weird. But have it bounded by hardness while also kind of doing variation just by notes per second. So I kind of ramp up, ramp down, have some variation in speed. So I'm trying to think through how I do that. And right now the idea is we kind of filter for things that are within range, and then I'm going to sort all of the steps by their notes per second, which I've kind of got a fudged scaling to make these sort of line up right now. Even though that relationship will vary by the player. This is kind of for my ability level, they kind of match up. Because I just fudged that number in there. So I'm trying to figure out how do I do that bound, and because like I'm selecting by 2 things, so I can't like have one value that works in all cases that scales to both of them. So I'm trying to define a new function, and I want I need to define 2 things. Flow is going to get used in a couple places. By default, it's what's drawn. So I was trying to define something that would sort of represent the allowed range of, or the wiggle within the range of things. So if we do wiggle of 0.1 to 0. And even that seems... And then wiggle it by that much. So we go from near the bottom near the top, wiggling so that it will reach the bounds. And then pick by range. This is where I have to define some different qualities. Because that's going current flow NPS bound. So I need to get another temporary fudge until I figure out how to do this right. Where we take... And actually, the values for this are here. Approximately that. From start score to mid score, and I had that set towards the max. And that score wiggle is... Actually, this one is not going to be wiggled. So I think... Oops. A 0, 0 will represent that. Oh, actually, just don't wiggle it. Duh. So that's not being used. Current flow is being the notes per second. Pick by range is going to be... I guess the way these others are used, I should be doing that. Score bound. That was lower bound, upper bound. The actual usage is going to be like sort of an upper bound. And the wiggle within that. So recently picked stuff. Range is maybe not as relevant. This is not a singular selection anymore. So upper bound, initial target, sure. Maybe call that lower bound. Get our low, go through possible steps. We want to only... So we get a bunch of stuff. We say... If low is less than score. Is that right? If I set my upper bound, if I set my bound as 60, and if say 60 is less than score, okay, so it's an allowable pick. Well, this is still, even after sorting it, this is still a multi-pass problem, because we have to find our lower bound. We have to find the first song, the first steps that meet our score boundary. That's the lower end of our notes per second selection range. We want the highest song that meets our score range. The upper end of the notes per second. Well, yeah, because we sorted by notes per second, so those are the bounds. And then within that range, we want to pick something. So within possible steps, Oh, so we can, yeah, so maybe I reposition this as... low, high. Equals 100. High equals 0. We go through once. Do I need not picked path? We should probably still exclude that. Use predicted score. If it is a candidate, then if the notes per second is less than low, well, actually, if it's the first one where we found it, but because they're sorted. And we should just be able to set high equals nths per second because they're always going forward. And that was stopping at the first one. This does not stop at the first one. These could potentially be found all the way up, so we can't really break out at any point. So then we have a low range, high range. We have a wiggle for that value. So then low equals low times wiggle I. No, it's just wiggle is a value within that range. What do we... local... Oh, right. Target is... something different, actually. Lower bound... I might actually want to use target there. Target is low plus high minus low times wiggle I. And then I kind of want pick by rate. We want a lower high again. Essentially that. Target minus range, we should probably be doing our range fix up here. Notes per second, notes per second. Now this is only picking by notes per second. We still have to make sure we're filtering some of this stuff. Score equals, notes per second equals... Oh, but now we've reused low. Wait, low, high. Max less than score? Score greater than max just make more sense here. Or does that preserve... Yeah, that preserves... This does preserve number line ordering for doing a full range. So the score is... Wait. Because we're... No, we're making it... Yeah, okay. So the fact that I draw it the other way is probably what's confusing me. So this would actually be max greater than score. Yeah. Score less than max. And we are... Well, is this not a... Right, because we get a target based on the wiggle. We have a selection range around that, so we can pick something. And... target is what we weren't actually able to find. This feels like way too much code. That's definitely the wrong answer. So what the heck are we doing here? Looks like I can see the curve there. It's so current flow is build flow, which is that 0 to 1. We have score bound, which should be reasonable. We have pick by range. Maybe I flipped these. Yeah, because I was doing that. So this is actually wiggle. Right, so the drawing of the selection range is going to be all messed up right now. So that's just pure random within the range. And right now, I'm placing no limits on how slow a song can get. So that's fine. We're clearly not respecting... Oh, or I don't think... our numbers are messed up right now. As far as our selection numbers. And only respecting the top bound means no. Because this is still a negative is still a very, very low score. Am I doing this backwards? No, because it's not max score, it's like min score. So this is... No, not... yeah, score is above min. It's like a max difficulty but a minimum score. So that's... I need to work on the rendering for how I'm drawing the selection ranges and things. Oh, we still have the whiplash effect. Because we're doing direct pick by that wiggle. And we have no lower bound on our notes per second. So we're getting ones that are way too slow. I could adjust that somewhat by fudging our wiggle curve. E3 5880. Arc. So when we're doing this, it's our start point, that's our end point. We are wiggling over the entire thing. No, we're wiggling over a range. That's it's a lot of wiggle. As we raise it up, bring up the bottom point, tighten up the middle. That's still some pretty big swings. And some very, very slow things at the start, because it's going over that entire range. I just need to have an additional thing for a floor. I might just put those in direct for now. Do we even care about things outside the NPS bound? Not really. So if we never even picked those, they wouldn't be considered. And NPS, this is a minimum. So that would not even allow it into the range. So I think that would actually exclude properly here. Whoa. A nil value. Oh, this might be a declaration order issue. How does Lua handle name collisions? Okay. So that's almost looking too tight. Or maybe my limits are too close. Well, that made a huge difference. That made too big of a difference. $60, $58, $58, $58. Or is this the doubled effect of doing this? Okay, that's a little bit more, and I did have the numbers tweaked up. Getting up to a 75 there. 85, 85, 85. My flow rendering's all messed up. So other than the difficulty still being a bit up, which is settings, by and large, that seems somewhat reasonable. Wait. Oh, I'm still wiggling this. This? Oh, no, this is a... Oh. I probably don't even want to... I probably want to make this... I could start with something like that. Actually, just a wiggle. Oh, I was trying to define a 0-1 wiggle. So that's 0.5, 0.5. Gives a constant. We should make a function for that at some point. And maybe the range of the wiggle is something we should define. And then it wiggles by 0.5 in each direction. So that's just the variation within the range. Oh. Yeah, a little bit different result. But now we've kind of got our whiplash again. Despite having an arc flow bound. Yeah, so now this is back to the problem of hitting the same levels over and over again. I mean, that one's not too bad. We definitely have the whiplash effect. Yeah, so I've got this doubled curve going on. If I do the double arc flow, where I have a limit there, and I'm selecting within the limit based on a rising and falling curve, which gets me some variation. But isn't just... Oh, right. So this is the full... Oh, it's the full range. That's rated a 6, but it's a 4.2. I probably need an upper limit on speed for the warm-up as well. So actually, instead of... Well, no, it's two values. We have notes per second high, which maybe we let go unlimited up here because we've got the score bound. And we've got notes per second low. So it's not even that. It's so we don't want to get any slower than that. We don't want... Starting out, we probably not want more than a 2. And we can peak at almost anything because we have other factors controlling that. I guess I could just apply those once. Well, no, because then we might actually cut off at that thing and not have a song there. See, so that was lower bound. Okay, so we've got a pretty constrained opening and closing. Upper bound relaxes pretty quick. 84, 84, 79, 79, 76, 79, 65, 83, 62. A little bit of whiplash. Some variation. Seems like picking does take a little bit longer. All the setting overlays need to be fixed. Yeah, and here's a very severe whiplash pattern. So I might still have to do something about that. pick a even selection of difficulties and then scramble them a bit? Trying to obey the curves? My lower notes per second bound seems pretty flat, too. Okay, the 5.6 is only allowed because we have an overly high score allowance, which is settings need to get tweaked once you get into the game. And peculiarity, the way I have it set up makes it hard to do now. So that's done nothing for the whiplash effect. Well, I'm purposefully swinging over the entire range. .4, 1.6. So our NPS lower bound. Yeah, right, I did reduce this trying to fix some other things. And of course, the problem with the notes per second limiting is that it's very player specific. So moving the lower bound more gives you a bit more variation. Oh. So I guess varying the flow did have a similar effect to that lower bound. I was like, well, I want to pick over the entire thing. Well, I kind of don't want to pick over the entire thing. So that establishes a low end and a high end, but they're at very specific places. And that's the amount of variation at each step. So that's kind of taking over. So this was allowing full range over all possible speeds. That takes care of this problem too. I mean, you end up having to fudge those numbers a little bit. Oh no, that thing. I might still need the lower bound. Because that's just over the range of notes per second, so you don't really have any absolute sense of that range. So that might be a little bit over-constrained. And with the other effect going on, you probably can go back down to like 1 to 2 or something. And then this is going to need so much cleanup to actually make sense when experimenting. So we want to significantly increase variation. We'll take it in steps. So this is sort of representing the amount of variation allowed. So we're not hitting max value, so that's interesting. Actually, 68, 70, 81. It's actually looking pretty decent. 64, 63. $67, $75. This area is a little flat. Right, because we're specifically not allowing variation in range there. So what if we did 3 and 3? So it was the same amount of variation overall? Then you could actually start to have a very fast starter end. It's a pity that we have to do estimated score fill-ins twice, because I suspect that's one of the things. But the only other option would be to prepare a new list or to somehow mark in the actual possible steps which ones were a candidate on this pass. But yeah, we end up running this twice, which is not very optimal. But that seems somewhat reasonable. Well, there's a couple 50s down there. 4.2, 5.1? Yeah, I might have to change my max settings. We didn't hit the high points on a couple of them, but I'm probably have to turn that down, and that still has to be fixed. Lots of UI updates are needed if this is how it's going to work. But we can checkpoint the experimentation. Okay, so I thought of one thing we need to fix. We want minimum iterations under normal circumstances. Okay, resort. Oh yeah, we did those adjustments. Got rid of some unused factors. So that's kind of like pick by rate with bounded score. Pick by rate with... Alright, so something might happen to change our song selection, but this is essentially what we're going to try today. And... setting should have some effect on this. It won't make sense versus how it's currently working. Alright, so that's it for the programming. If you were here for that, thanks for hanging out. Maybe next time. I will be back in a few minutes to actually try playing this on a dance pad. If you want to hang out, I'll be here. I'm going to have to drop stream to change settings. But meanwhile, thanks for watching. Thanks for Oh Boy for bringing friends. And everybody else for hosting. Which reminds me, I need to... make a note to look at you later. I'm normally doing coding in the mornings, and then Monday, Wednesday, Friday, switching over to Stepmania. At the moment, I am actually working on Stepmania. Other times, I'm working on other projects. But yeah, I'll be back in a little bit to bounce around in a dance pad. If you want to hang out, great. If you don't, great. And until next time.